In this video tutorial, we will be talking about how to plot a drawing, and more specifically, how to plot a drawing from Modelspace. You might be asking, why are we learning how to plot from Modelspace when AutoCAD now has Paperspace? Well, here's the reason why. AutoCAD has been around a lot longer than Paperspace has. Therefore, there are lots and lots of drawings out in the market that were drawn in Modelspace and therefore printed from Modelspace. It takes time and money to switch those drawings over, and as the saying goes, you don't fix what's not broke. So there are lots of companies out there still printing from Modelspace. So we have on the screen here today a very simple title block and some objects inside of it. The objects aren't really important, and the shape of the title block isn't either. It's just to demonstrate something that's been drawn in Modelspace and then how to print from there. So what we want to do is talk about printing or plotting. Both are used interchangeably today in AutoCAD from Modelspace. We have right here the icon for the plot dialog box. Click on it here. Here we go. And that brings up the plot from Modelspace dialog box. Now there's a couple things that have to be set up properly. You can make a print correctly as far as how it looks, but if you want a print to the actual size that it's supposed to be, well, that's a different procedure. So what we have to start with is we have to start with selecting our printer. As you can see, we have a list of printers here. These are just the printers that this computer has access to, and of course there are a lot of things you can do other than print. You can turn something into a PDF, you can publish it to the web, and there's a lot of options there on how to do that, but we're going to focus on actually printing a hard copy of something. So we've selected our printer. The next thing we need to do is select our paper size, and with this particular drawing we're going to use a letter size paper or something that's 8.5 by 11, but because we're printing in landscape, it'll be 11 by 8.5. Then we have the plot area. We want to use limits because we want it to print the actual size that it is. And to make that happen, we do not want to click Fit to Paper, and we do not want to click Center the Plot. We also want to make sure it's 1:1. Why? Because our scale is 1:1. If our scale was 1:48, we put a 1 here, we put a 48 there. Now, let's talk a little bit about the printer and how we can make things print out properly. I'm going to click on the printer properties, and I'm going to go to the device document settings. We're going to click on the modify standard paper sizes because we want to see what the printable area is. So when I click on that, we get some information right here. We're not intending to, as it says, modify our standard paper size. We just want to see what we're working with. So right now it says we have a printable area of 10.29 by 15.02. So let's go down here and select letter. Now that's the actual paper we're going to print on, and it says we have a width of 8.5 and a height of 11. That's your standard standard letter size paper. Now that's actually a mechanical standard size. Architectural will be 9 by 12, but since most computers in schools today print off of an 8.5 by 11, we're going to fudge a little bit here, and we're just going to print off of that and call that fine. Technically it's mechanical. So we have right here this LR.17, comma 0.17. That is what we call the non-printable portion of the page. So we're going to have a border all the way around the page that will not print, and it's going to be 0.17 on the X and 0.17 on the Y. The actual printable area on our paper is 8.17 by 10.67. The Hardflip Limits right here are called that because with a printer, the machine has to be able to grip the paper as it moves through the printer. And it's called Hardflip Limits because we'll say the printer is going to grab it with some clips that are hard because they're mechanical, they're metal, they're plastic. And everywhere those devices grip the paper, you can't print. Unlike a plotter, which rolls it through with rollers only, and you can print on the whole surface of the paper, but we're not printing with a plotter, we're printing with a printer. So the reason we show you this is because this tells us our printable area, which has impact on how large of a border you can have drawn. So let me close this out and close this out. So we have a border title block here that is a certain size. It's 8 by 10.5, which will fit inside of that Hardflip Limits. So it's always important to know what the Hardflip Limits are of the printer you're using, because forgot to select my printer. Yep, there it is, properties. And the reason that's important to know is because you have to know what's the maximum amount of printing area I have on my page. And this tells us right here. So our 8 by 10.5 is just inside of that 0.17. Okay, that's called the Hardflip Limits. So it's important to know that. So once all that is set up, the only other thing we always set up when we're printing out is we select Monochrome because it's cheaper. You know, you see we're using colors here. But if you're teaching at a school, typically you're going to have a black and white printer. You might have a color one, but I don't think you want to waste your color ink on printing out CAD files. Everything else is what we call default. And the only other thing you would change here is the portrait or the landscape. We're going to, even though this says we have some issues here, I know in real life we don't, based on experience. And there it is. Now, it's not perfectly centered, but it will print out more centered than that when you print the page out. I'm going to hit escape. And then the last thing, once you get things set up the way you want to in a drawing, you can click Apply to Layout. And what that does is that saves all these settings to this drawing so that when I pull it up again, I can just go to OK and it will print properly. Now, we mentioned earlier on that we do not want to click Center to Plot or Center the Plot and Fit to Paper. If I click Fit to Paper, those red lines go away. And if we preview it, it will look a little different. See that? It looks different. One of the things that it's going to do when we do that is when it prints out, it will no longer print out true size. Now, why does that matter? Well, remember we talked about in companies where they're still printing from Modelspace, well, we still also have people out in the workforce who are going to actually measure off of that drawing. Let's say it's a shop drawing out on a shop floor. They're going to measure it because that's what they've always done. Even though there might be dimensions on the drawing, they're still going to measure it, which means the drawing had better match the dimensions, and they're not going to be happy. They might think something's wrong because that's how they've always done it. So we want to print out something in Modelspace that is as accurate as we can make it. Now, there are other things you can do in your printer to make it even more accurate, but we're not going to get into that in this lesson. So once all that is set up, we just click OK, and your drawing prints out. And that is printing from Modelspace.